Hello and welcome everyone to electionspeakers.com, the place for a unique critique of the important speakers of this 2012 presidential campaign. My name is Dr. Dennis Becker, and I'll be your host for these special podcasts which are designed to give voters valuable information needed to make a confident decision on November the 6th. We'll be watching and listening to the candidates and others who are trying to win your vote. Their talking techniques, their tactics are our exclusive topic for this unique critique. And joining us on this podcast from left to right around your radio dial, first of all, is senior coaching partner Laurie Schloff. Welcome, Laurie.
Great to be here, Dennis.
In addition to Laurie, senior coaching partner Monica Murphy is with us. Monica, welcome.
Glad to be here, Dennis. Thanks.
And joining us today is president of the Speech Improvement Company and senior coaching partner Ethan Becker. Welcome, Ethan.
Hey, it's great to join everybody. Finally, I made it.
Yeah, well, Ethan's a traveler, does a lot of traveling, but he's listened to the show, and he's very well prepared for today. And today, we're going to be talking about the two speakers that we all heard last night on the at the Democratic National Convention. The two speakers, there's a lot of speakers, but we're going to focus on two. The keynote speaker, Julian Castro, the mayor of San Antonio, and, of course, the First Lady, Michelle Obama. Let's begin by talking about Julian Castro. Now, guests, as you know, listeners, we score these folks when they speak. And Laurie, would you just give us a quick rundown on how we score these speakers each time?
Absolutely, Dennis. We have 10 dimensions on our scorecard. And I really want to emphasize, everybody who's listening, we are judging performance at the podium, not their politics. So politics doesn't have anything to do with how we score people as speakers. 10 dimensions, I'll go into just a couple of them. Use of gestures, facial expression. Do you like looking at the person? There's speed of speech. Are they connecting with their listeners? And how's their wording and organization? Are they interesting to listen to? Mm-hmm. And then we score out of 100. Your maximum score is 100. So if you get a score close to 100, you're better. Much less than 60, you probably need a speech coach.
Good. Well, I'm sure they all have speech coaches. How well they do is what we're here to talk about. So let's talk about Julian Castro first of all. Now, here's a guy who is giving the keynote. Now, remember, this a keynote speech in any organization, whether it's a large conference in a corporate setting or it's here, the keynote gets its name from the orchestra, where someone sounds a key note and everybody else tunes to that. So in a setting like this, who gives the keynote speech is really setting the tone, setting the theme, setting the direction, the topics that will be discussed by the other speakers. So let's talk about the keynote speaker last night, and then for a moment we'll compare him to the keynote speaker that we heard last week, Chris Christie for the Republicans. So, Laurie, let's begin with you. What did you think about Julian Castro? How did he do?
I'm struggling. It's hard for me to find a negative. Where did this guy come from? He's the mayor of San Antonio. Has he talked to crowds like this before? Dennis, I gave him 94 out of 100. In terms of keynote, and I thought you described that really well, one message he said really stood out to me: opportunity today, prosperity tomorrow. Yep. Secondly, he seemed very happy to be there. He seemed to have genuine smiles. He seemed to interact with the audience, appreciating their responses as opposed to trying to talk over their responses. And he could be funny with his timing. For example, he said Mitt Romney has undergone an extreme makeover, which I thought was really funny and playing off, of course, the TV show. But most importantly, and this is characteristic of a very high-level advanced speaker, probably our highest level kinds of clients, he was surprising. He was interesting to watch because he wasn't predictable. So his hands did different things. His face and his voice changed a lot. And this is very important. I thought in his talk he had a wide range of emotions, from humor, maybe even a little silly, to expressing anger.
Mm-hmm. Here's a guy who had a variety of things to say, and there are a couple of things in there that I want to mention that you didn't mention. But first of all, let me hear from Monica Murphy. How did Julian Castro do, Monica?
Well, Laurie said it beautifully. I mean, he was really delightful to watch. He seemed to enjoy being there. He seemed very spirited in what he was doing. And it seemed as though he must have given several talks before. I know he's only the mayor, but I agree with a lot of things that have been said so far. Overall, my score for him was an 85. I thought he did a terrific job. The highest score I gave him was a 10 for his connection with listeners. I thought that particular part was outstanding. I've got to disagree, though, with one thing Laurie said about the facial expression. I felt like he kept those smiles under wrap, and he only used them ever so strategically when he wanted to make a point. So he was smiling and with a sentence that was using incredibly harsh language. So, for example, he'd say, "That dream is being crushed." And he's smiling, but he's really saying something that was quite forceful. So that was one thing. And the second comment I want to make, too, is that he used his pausing for effect. That's a tool that we talk about as speech coaches to gain a level of attention or make an impact. And he used that pausing for effect so effectively. For example, when he was getting the crowd chanting with the nose, 4 times he got them chanting. He'd even get them to finish the sentence, "No, no, no." And then he had a dramatically long pause, said the word "actually." 4 times he said that word, paused, "actually, pause, actually, pause," and referred to the other candidate saying "yes," and now he says "no." So the way he used those pauses, I thought, was just very, very effective in building him a 10 for connecting with listeners.
That was all around the rhetorical redundancy technique called that's called rhetorical redundancy.
Right, yes.
He was using Mitt Romney says no. He did it 4 times, as you said. Mitt Romney says no. The whole crowd was into it. That's a real indicator that the speaker has connected with the audience when they repeat precisely what you say.
They were finishing his sentences.
Yeah, exactly. And then very interesting part of that technique, the 5th one, because he did it 4 times in a row, the 5th one was about health care. And he paused. And they didn't know what to do. Because he did not want to say Mitt Romney said no, because Mitt Romney said yes. And then he said no.
Right. So
he did a really nice job of setting it up. Ethan, let's hear from Ethan. Go ahead.
That's a very difficult technique, and I think we've seen it at the conventions, at probably all of the conventions in recent maybe 15, 20 years, that type of technique where the speaker is trying to play off the crowd. And he did it very effectively last night. He was very comfortable with that technique. We saw it at the Republican side. Maybe not as much comfort with it. It takes a little bit of practice and familiarity with the crowd. And you got to work with the
audience.
You've got to be able to read the audience and go with it. In my experience, that works best when the speaker is working with a speech coach together in the writing of the speech. It's not so easy to pull off when somebody has written it for you, because you don't have as great as an understanding. In the corporate world, when we work with executives at like large conferences and they're trying to use that type of technique, I'll work with them so that they actually are a part of that. Then in the delivery, it is so much more real. And I suspect something like that happened last night. But one area with him that I think he could work on is as he was opening in the beginning, when he first came out, there was he crescendoed throughout the speech. He got more comfortable as he went, which, as we know, is a very common thing. I think when he first came out, he wasn't as much on his game as he was midway of the speech and towards the end. His eyes were very red and sort of thin towards the beginning, and then later he opened up. The emotion came in. Very natural. I mean, I'm not surprised by this as a coach, but that's something that I picked up on.
Right. Well, this is the thing that I would say he needs to work on, and I did not like about his speech. The crescendoing that you just talked about, it was there constantly. And I think a good keynote speech needs to lead to that. Well, he'd lead to it crescendo, and then, no, he's not done. Here's another one. And then
I do agree with that.
They were good crescendos,
They were good, but there was a lot of them. Now, if you look at the target listener, just as at the Republican convention, the target listener is the base, is the people who are already fans. On both sides, I think they did an effective job with that. I think in the Democrats so far, they've really spoken to their designed listener. If I'm a Republican listening to him, I'm probably disgusted. I'm probably turned off.
Well, huge difference between what he did and Chris Christie. Laurie, remember Chris Christie when he did his keynote speech?
Absolutely.
Remember what would you say is the biggest difference between the two keynoters?
I would say that the biggest difference is that Chris Christie seemed to have one mood. Now, think about what a speech is, and this is very instructional for those of you who have to give talks at the PTA or in business, is you have a very short time for your audience to get to know you. Try to have as much of a range of emotion as you possibly can. So that's why I admired a newcomer like Julian being able to go from humor to play, almost playing games with the audience, to being very serious and angry at times, whereas I felt Christy was pretty much one note. You know what? Maybe he was just in a bad mood that night. But most commentators said he wasn't at his best.
Yeah. All right, listen, we've got to move on now. Let's talk about Michelle Obama, because she, of course, was supposed to be the star of the show. So how did she do? And we're going to compare her briefly to the other star of the show for the Republicans, Ann Romney, because they're two of a kind in a sense. So let's talk about Ann. Let's talk about Michelle Obama. How did she do? Monica, let's go first with you. We'll talk about what you gave her for a score and what you noticed about good and what could be worked on for Michelle Obama.
Well, Dennis, I thought overall that she really, really did achieve what I think she came to do. She really came to motivate the crowd and kick off the convention on a positive and high note, and I think she was overall very, very effective in doing that. I gave her a 90 out of a possible 100. I thought she was fantastic with several things, including the rate and speed in which she was speaking. And I know we're going to talk in a minute. I want to talk a little bit about some of the nonverbal things. I would say that two things I thought that were terrific. One was her use of words and messaging and headlining things. So, for example, she used so many catchy phrases like being president doesn't change who you are. No, it reveals who you are. And it's not how much you make, it's about the difference you make in people's lives. I mean, she was very, very effective, whether that was her or her scriptwriter, Sarah Hurwitz. She was obviously very close to this because she really delivered those with a lot of passion. Now, having said that, I was talking with Laurie just before the broadcast started, and I did feel overall, though, her sentences were too long. So I liked the phrases that I pulled out. I liked the use of words, but I felt overall the structure of the sentences were too long.
Yeah, well, listen, we're trying to balance these. It's kind of difficult because she was such an effective speaker. So if you do find things, Laurie, what could she work on? Because we really want to balance this. We're not judging the content in any way.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Right. I gave her a very high score, 83 out of 100. One of the things I'd like all of us to think about, and our listeners too, is, though, wasn't she really trying to reach the 6% or so undecideds? And that's what I'm wondering. Did she, content-wise or delivery-wise, do anything that would change their minds?
If they were all moms, maybe.
Yes, you're right. The theme of the military wives and mom-in-chief, that seemed very strategic to me. Don't hold it, I did give her high scores. However, I did find her tiring to listen to, like post-midway, because I felt, unlike Julian Castro, she wasn't surprising. She didn't do much that was different. I found her very predictable, yet one could argue maybe she shouldn't be too out of bounds. She is, after all, the First Lady. And, people have been criticized for not acting within their role.
Did you give her a score?
Yes, I did. I gave her a very high score, 83 out of 100. The one thing also that people are talking about Michelle is that she has transformed from her first appearance on the national scene, that she is a softer, sweeter person, more empathic in the things she says, less quote-unquote militant. In other words, she's angrier less. And even such things as her appearance, with her hair being softer, and this, you're going to like this one, guys, her eyebrows being less arched. And there is some relationship between the sort of the contour of your eyebrows and how people perceive your mood.
I noticed less scowling. I don't know how else to say it.
That's
Less
exactly
scowling
what I'm
on her
talking
face.
about,
She
Dennis.
seemed to be
Exactly what I'm
enjoying
talking
her
about.
own stories. She was enjoying what she was saying. Ethan, how
I think
about you?
I think that's a good example of the impact delivery can make in any given speech, even with really good content. When you look at the ethos that someone has, and we often teach people about the importance of one's ethos, the credibility you have, when you are delivering a topic and it sounds conversational, it becomes more believable, as opposed to the same message coming from somebody who sounds like they are reading it. Even though the words are there, the message it can be much more believable. And I think she did a very effective job at doing that last night. It's not easy to do that. She's obviously been doing a lot of practice since she has come onto the scene, and I think that showed. I also do agree with Laurie probably about halfway in. I started to reach the Yano meter where, and I don't mean that the content wasn't interesting. That's a different category, but her pattern of speech became predictable. And
though it was still good, but it was predictable, and that's a lesson for our
I've
listeners.
seen this. I would say
good,
watch for
but too
this.
predictable.
Actually, I would watch for this. Now, Bill Clinton, I think historically is really good at avoiding that. But Obama in the past, his long form speeches become predictable. George Bush had the same problem where short form, hey, sounds great. Long form, after about 10 minutes, it becomes a little bit more effort to pay attention to the speakers.
We'll get the opportunity to talk a lot more about Bill Clinton tomorrow's program because he's a speaker tomorrow. That's
Didn't mean to skip ahead. Things to watch for.
But just just a quick comparison between the two female speakers. Clearly different. Clearly. All right. Let's. Let me ask Monica first. What's your view? How do you compare those two? What do you think?
Well, they're two totally different types of people to think about, but I think they both were trying to achieve the same goal. Give a level of empathy, give us a sense of how somebody makes their decisions at the end of the day, who is back there behind the timeline of the president and how they make their decisions. And one of the things I think that really we were looking for as listeners is how does the president make a decision? He has people in mind when he makes his decision. Who are those people? And I think the goal of both of the women was to say, and I heard at least last night from our speaker last night, from Michelle, is that he has the people of the country in mind. And I think that that's important, whereas maybe we didn't feel that specifically as we heard when we heard Romney speak last week. But the point I wanted to point out really quickly was, we were just talking now about the messaging and the delivery of Michelle changing halfway through. The first part of the talk where I was very engaged, there was something that really bugged me, and it is hard to find something, but one thing that bothered me, and I'll ask the coaches to weigh in, was that Michelle was saying very affirming things, but non-verbally there was a little tiny bit that wasn't really as genuine as it could be. There's something that we use as coaches, we point out, called a no nod. In other words, verbally you're saying something, but non-verbally your head is giving a negative message, moving to the left as if saying...
Shaking it left and right.
Shaking it left and right, no. So, for example, she was saying, this is all right in the first 45 seconds. I was certain he'd make an extraordinary president. No, he wasn't. In other words, the head is going back and forth,
fascinating,
sideways.
Monica, really.
And we see this sometimes as a way to show empathy, but, we'd see it at her most emotional times. So she'd shake her head no, saying, Barack is the same man I fell in love with. No, he isn't. No, he isn't.
We actually discussed this particular phenomena we've been discussing with our coaching team here, at our developmental days, talking about why do speakers do that disconnect. And one of the ideas that came out was that in their mind, it's a sense of disbelief, like, I cannot believe this. You will not believe this. And that's where the negative psychology comes from, that this is so good. Like if I'm having some ice cream, I'll shake my head saying, oh, this is so good, but my head is shaking left to right. My nonverbals are saying, I won't believe it, or you won't believe it. And then my verbals are saying, yes, this is so good. Right. And it's a fascinating thing. Happens
the
a lot.
teaching point here, I think the team would agree, is, wow, how many things as presenters, as speakers, we have to be in control of.
That's right.
But I would also say this. I don't think that the fact that she did it is necessarily a negative, because in part it showed a little bit of that sort of, hey, I'm human.
But I don't think she intended it. And
no,
Dennis,
I don't think she intended it at all.
Mention the part we were talking about before, Dennis, about her disfluency pattern later in the talking.
As the speech went along, we noticed disfluency is a strong way to say it, but there was this tendency to repeat things. Now, her
first word,
only the first word.
Where she would say, I
think it was intentional.
Her hubby does the same thing.
I'm positive, actually.
But I think it helps.
It was intentional at first,
I think it helps. I think it's a helpful
time,
technique.
I think it was intentional.
Yep. So
I think it helps break the
feeling
feeling of somebody reading.
But now reading, do you think that the I was actually on the teleprompter, or did she add
I
that?
doubt it. I doubt it.
That's a speaking
In my
technique that she's adding.
To be honest, in my experience, I don't think that. I doubt that they're that good. And I don't mean that in a skeptical
the
way.
writers, you mean?
That the writers are that thoughtful in the human communication part. I think they're really good
disagree.
at focus of message. I bet you they are not.
It
that,
could be.
To
I mean,
that level that
they do write
of.
the word pause and those other kind of things on.
Hey,
the
that is
script,
something that we would do. I know.
Yeah,
In
well,
my
you're a good
experience,
speaker.
talking with folks, I
Now,
just
how about Ann Romney? Now, she didn't do any of that. She really stuck to the script, and we didn't see hardly any ad-libbing or improvisation from her. Was she effective?
Well, imperfection, such as can humanize you. And
That's
I
right.
think Michelle has strategically, I don't think she's conscious necessarily, but by now has learned to do that. Whereas Anne, as a inexperienced speaker, isn't at that point. Trust me, you know, if her husband is elected president, we will see a different Ann Romney in 4 years. In the following way, she'll be a heck of a lot more relaxed. Whatever that means, we'll have to see.
Fair. I think
We made the comment the other day about Paul Ryan, and I'm going to make it again about Michelle Obama because I heard it again, and it just sort of annoys me. I don't know why you get to that level. The sound of the letters ST, as in the word strong or struggle, are not the sound of SHT, like strong and struggle. It's a speech impediment, basically, that she has. And I just, for all the good things that we're saying about it, it's a little bothersome, and I think she should work on that. At any rate, we got to wrap this up. What final notes do we have, folks? Nothing. Good. Okay, we've carried our listeners long enough because we're going to be back again tomorrow, and we'll be talking about the speakers at the Democratic Convention again tomorrow, as we will throughout the convention period of time, and all of the speaking that goes on between now and the elections, and particularly when we get to the debates. We'll talk a lot more about that a little bit later, and that's all we have time for right now on this edition of electionspeakers.com. We'll be back with you with more of the most unique critique of these important speakers in this 2012 presidential campaign tomorrow. We'll be back tomorrow. Today, thanks to our coaches, senior coaching partner Monica Murphy for being with us, senior coaching partner Laurie Schloff being with us, and president of the Speech Improvement Company, Ethan Becker, for being with us. And until next time, I'm Dr. Dennis Becker saying thanks for listening and bye for now.
Bye-bye.